From the beginning of time until now, plague, war, famine, death, have always been concepts that make people feel fearful. That is why these four concepts have appeared in the event of the Judgment Day in the Bible in the form of creatures called the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse. Surely each of us has heard the phrase, Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, at least once. Especially those who are fans of movies, books, or popular art in general. This is because rarely any content in the Bible has been exploited as much as this. So what are the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse really? If this is a question you are wondering about, then today's video will provide an answer for you. The Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse are images originating from Christianity, and appear in the last book of the New Testament called the Book of Revelation. This book recounts the visions of St. John about the Day of Judgment, or can be seen as a message from God about the end of the world. According to this, when the sins and decadence of humanity are no longer tolerable, God will pass judgment on humankind by destroying the world, thereby opening up a brighter future under the leadership of God. The Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse appear in chapter 6 of the Book of Revelation, which mentions a book in the right hand of God sealed with 7 seals. When the first 4 seals are opened, 4 beings ride on 4 horses of white, red, black, and pale. These 4 beings are called the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse. Although there are many different versions, these 4 horsemen are generally considered to be symbols of conquest, war, famine, and death. The appearance of the 4 horsemen is also a signal for disasters to come to the world. Humankind accepts God's judgment by undergoing calamities to atone for their sins. The moment of destruction is the turning point that opens up a brighter future. The perspective of Christianity is that the 4 horsemen will bring sacred revelation to the world as messengers of the final judgment. Next, let's explore each of these mysterious characters one by one. The first part of chapter 6 of the Book of Revelation is described as follows. And I saw when the Lamb opened one of the seals, and I heard, as it were the noise of thunder, one of the 4 beasts saying, Come and see. And I saw, and behold a white horse. And he that sat on him had a bow, and a crown was given unto him. And he went forth conquering, and to conquer. The image of a white horse and the rider with a bow and a crown symbolizes conquest or ambitious kings and rulers. There are also opinions that the first horse represents plague, while some scholars believe that this horse is Christ himself. Irenaeus, a 2nd century Christian theologian who had a great influence at that time. He was one of the first to associate the image of the white horse with Christ and explained that the white horse represents the spreading of the gospel of Christ. In a broader sense, this rider is representative of the Holy Spirit. In 1866, a scholar named Zimpel proposed a completely different interpretation. He stating that the white rider represents those who oppose Christ or false prophets. Nevertheless, in popular culture, the first horseman is still commonly recognized as a symbol of punishment or disease. The next part of chapter 6 of the Book of Revelation describes, When the Lamb opened the 2nd seal, I heard the 2nd living creature say, Come. Then another horse came out, a fiery red one. Its rider was given power to take peace from the earth and to make people kill each other. To him was given a large sword. The 2nd rider is described as holding a large sword and ready to enter into battle, riding a fiery red horse, a symbol of war. His red color represents the fire and bloodshed wherever he goes. The 2nd rider represents civil wars, in contrast to the conquest brought by the first rider. Some opinions suggest that the red rider represents the persecution of the Christian faith, while other interpretations suggest that the 2nd rider represents the division of empires. The next part of chapter 6 of the Book of Revelation states, When the Lamb opened the 3rd seal, I heard the 3rd living creature say, Come. I looked, and there before me was a black horse. Its rider was holding a pair of scales in his hand. Then I heard what sounded like a voice among the 4 living creatures, saying, 2 pounds of wheat for a day's wages, and 6 pounds of barley for a day's wages, and do not damage the oil and the wine. The 3rd rider, holding a pair of scales and riding a black horse, is a symbol of famine, bringing with him a shortage of food. He is the only rider mentioned, and besides talking about the price of wheat and barley, he also says, Do not damage the oil and wine. This implies that the famine brought by the Black Rider increases the price of grains but does not affect the supply of oil and wine, which are luxury items that are out of reach for the poor. This is said to suggest the oppression of the ruling class, where luxury items are abundant, but essential goods are not accessible to the common people. The last horseman in the quartet is described as follows. When the Lamb opened the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth living creature say, "Come." I looked, and there before me was a pale horse. Its rider was named Death, and Hades was following close behind him. They were given power over a fourth of the earth to kill by sword, famine and plague, and by the wild beasts of the earth. The final rider, riding a pale greenish horse, is known as Thanatos, or Death. And behind him is Hades, representing the realm of death. He is the only rider mentioned by name, and unlike the others, he carries no weapons or other items and only has Hades following behind him. Many depictions of him show him carrying a scythe, and his horse is a pale, sickly color like that of a corpse. The Black Knight carries destruction and death, so there is another interpretation that the fourth knight represents the destruction of an empire. According to the Book of Revelation, the four horsemen of the apocalypse embody the calamities that humans must endure. The first knight represents conquest or pestilence. Conquest leads to war, war leads to famine. And the task of the fourth knight, the personification of death, is to gather the bodies left behind when war and famine have passed. The successive appearance of these four knights brings about the destruction for those who must be judged by the Lord. Throughout history, there have been many different interpretations of the four horsemen of the apocalypse. Christians believe that only one person rides consecutively on four horses, namely God. Some Docetists believe that these four knights are a prophecy of a future disaster. Some modern scholars interpret the apocalypse based on the hypothesis that the prophecy. And these images apply to real events in the first century of Christian history. According to this hypothesis, the white horse rider is a symbol of the Parthian army. Because the Parthian Empire was known for its highly skilled archers who often rode on white horses. According to this hypothesis, the four horsemen representing war and famine are related to the historical context when the Book of Revelation was written. In 92 AD, Roman Emperor Domitian attempted to limit the excessive growth of grapevines and encourage the cultivation of cereals. But there was a fierce public reaction against this effort and it was abandoned. The task of famine is to make wheat and barley scarce. But do not harm oil and wine, which may refer to this detail. The red horse of war is regarded as representative of the widespread conflicts in the Roman Empire before the 1st century AD. Scholars, researchers, and artists have presented countless different interpretations of the four horsemen of the apocalypse through their works in history. With such a highly symbolic image, it is not surprising that people try to find many layers of hidden meanings and interpret it in different ways. Pestilence, war, famine, and death have always been concepts that evoke much imagination. But fundamentally, they are still disasters that make humanity always afraid. The view of Docetism is that these four knights will bring sacred revelation to the world as messengers of the final judgment. With their fame, the four horsemen of the apocalypse appear frequently in works such as books, paintings, literature, movies, and even video games. The first film about the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse was recorded as the film, The Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, in 1921. The famous film, X-Men Apocalypse, released in 2016, features a villain named Apocalypse, under whom four henchmen are named after the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse: Magneto, Psylocke, Storm, and Angel. In the Supernatural series, characters representing the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse appear. At the end of the 4th season, the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse were released into the world, each taking the shape of a man with a matching colored car and a ring with their power. These four are named Death, War, Famine, and Pestilence. With their frequent appearance in popular culture, the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse have become a familiar image today. But don't forget that this quartet was created as a symbol of the destruction that God brought down on humanity, the result of the sins that humans have committed. Pestilence, war, famine, and death are disasters that humanity has always wanted to avoid from the beginning of time to the present day. That concludes today's video. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe to support me. Goodbye and see you in the next video.